Welcome. This is Astrology Insight Now, a weekly forecast program with astrology and other ways to help you make the most of your week and to heighten confidence for daily life. It's run by Pamela Cuccinell, that's me, the astrologer, and I invite you to find out more about my work at insightoasis.com. I look forward to your joining us every week. Please share with your friends, and here we go.
The week of December 22nd, 2025. We're getting close to the end of 2025. And next year, 2026, that's a 1 numerology. And a 1 year, and I'll talk more about this next call, and maybe I'll do a separate one too. But a 1 year is about fresh starts, new beginnings. Think in terms of the new moon amplified. And we run in 9-year cycles in numerology, and they build, of course, like everything else. And we also look at how they dovetail with the other mythological symbols that are time-worn over millennium, and we utilize in ways that remind us of how we are all connected to this great solar system, universe, and beyond. I was having a conversation with a friend who was saying to me that he was thinking about how in the old days, when there were no lights and we could look up and see the sky, truly see the sky, especially at, say, the new moon, when the moon is dark and the stars are just their own story of light and dance and drawing the eye in to this universe that expands and is, from our perspective, quite infinite because we don't know where it ends. But now that we can't see that, except, of course, through, well, the illusion of not being up close and personal, things we see on our screen, visual images, we know there's billions of stars out there, the Milky Way and beyond, but we don't see it. And so something has been lost in our hunger to know with our great technology. So as we move into the next one, we are in this, well, at this point, less than 2 weeks of finishing up the 9-year cycle. And whew, what a year, what a ride it's been. Really, since the opening of this millennium, arguably even beforehand, we continue to grapple with our greatness as human beings, what we've been able to achieve, accomplish, and take for granted in our daily lives, especially people in first world countries. And we fail to take responsibility necessarily for what all this is creating and making happen. And so today on the 22nd, which my calendar says Hanukkah ends, and the solstice was this past weekend, and we are moving into the holidays that are celebrated for Christmas and Kwanzaa. We are in a week that reminds us of, I think, personal responsibility. And this is highlighted the first couple of days of the week, where when I talk about personal responsibility, in this case, I'm looking at Uranus and its position. And Uranus doesn't usually like to think of itself as being responsible energy. Uranus is the individual, the part of ourselves that appreciates our genius, our unique vibration, the things about each one of us that makes us different than anyone else. And the mantra is freedom, change. And for some of us, that's more comfortable energy than others, certainly. But when I use the word responsibility, I'm also speaking about the responsibility to the beat of your own personal drummer, certainly, but the recognition about how each of our individual vibrations affects and works with the whole. And I think this is something that's been a bit lost in the idealization of the ego and the me and the I and the sense of personal importance that certainly a highly commercial society emphasizes. Oh, buy this car because then you'll be special. Buy these boots because then you'll stand out. And so we get lost a bit in the desire to stand out and be a strong individual and the interface with the community and how our voice or our personal way of doing things or saying what we want or would like to have happen affects everyone else. And because of how the week opens, all right, let me talk a little more specifically about this. So the moon is in the sign of Capricorn in the morning hours. And these morning hours are actually very rich for continuing with what I talked about last week, that taking what it is we want to express and accept responsibility for, because that was to me what the new moon was speaking a lot about, and implementing that over the weekend, the solstice energy that's more the long view of how we push out with that sense of personal responsibility within our personal spiritual alignment. And a lot of people nowadays are feeling as though they're spiritual, but they don't necessarily have a connection to a formalized religion. And even if you do have a strong connection with a formalized religion and you identify with a spiritual mandate, I think that's another thing that's being called into question quite a bit. Yes, here we are at the season of Christmas when the teachings of Jesus Christ, for those who actually read those teachings, is about loving one another and valuing human life. And it is Joseph and Mary seeking shelter as immigrants, people who didn't belong or come from the town that they found themselves for the census, uh, and how they looked for shelter. So this is really highlighted in certain countries like the United States that is pushing away a sense of immigration and welcoming people who were not born or have the color of skin or the religious tagline branding that goes with whoever else feels comfortable. So this is something to sink into. in the early morning hours. It's are you aligned with what you say your spiritual beliefs are? And it's very important for human beings to value and respect one another, because if we don't, okay. So there's 12 signs in the zodiacal wheel, and we look at planets, we look at a lot of different energies, and some of us have stronger emphasis in some signs than others. And a person may say, oh, I don't like Scorpios, or I don't like Virgos, or I don't like Geminis, as I think of some of the most maligned signs in the zodiac. And yet, there are aspects of all those signs and energies in each of us, because we all have the same celestial DNA, and we all have the same bodily component as any other human being. Yes, things are different with, uh, there are variations, but, heart, liver, lungs, red blood, all these things are the same. So when we look at the variations, it's more about understanding those variations and coming to terms, instead of pushing away and not say, and just saying, I don't believe, I don't see, I don't want. And so this is a really sweet morning to sink in and reflect on, who do I have trouble with? What am I pushing away? What is it I don't understand and I'm just furious at? And allowing yourself to sit with those things to a point of not necessarily neutrality, because it is important that we recognize things that make us angry, that unsettle us. Then we understand what it is that we need to change, modify, work with, and gain insight and perspective too. Because being angry and strident and diminishing may feel very empowering, but the way to move with it is to also recognize where the fear comes from, where the anger comes from, where the misalignment is coming from. And it's actually not dissimilar to what happens with, we have pesticides. We need to eradicate this vermin. And that works to a point, but things come back. And so it's important to understand the balance as to why, and find ways to have these things work in more constructive ways than destructive ways. And we don't do it by simply wanting to destroy it. It can't work. And I'm not saying I have answers to these things. Trust me, I'm so not saying that. But I am saying that we can tap into insight when we work with energies that are available to us on certain days to turn the lights on. And so these lights are available in the early morning of Monday. And the moon goes void, of course, at 9:44 a.m. And then it enters the sign of Aquarius at 10:52 a.m. And this is when, as I was saying at the beginning, that sense of, okay, individual expression at odds with my company, my family, trying to get from point A to point B. How do I express and be who I am and work within this frame? And so that may be the challenge for some of us, perhaps acute or subtle over the next couple of days. But it's very much about working with what is it that I feel I must express or what's coming up or needs to happen. And yet I feel as though I'm pushing against or something's going to erupt or shift suddenly because I want it so badly. I'm not working strategically. The ideal is to work strategically because when we don't, it can have a jack in the box quality. And I know a lot of my listeners don't even know what that is, but it was a toy in the old days. It was a box, and you opened it up, and Jack would just pop out. Um, Sounds sort of like really, but yes, it was a thing. Not that I'm that old, but I do know what they are. So it is that surprise. I didn't know what was in this box until I opened it up. And so be alert to sudden things that can shift, especially as we get into Christmas Eve. Oh, a surprise guest. Oh, a guest who didn't come. And now we don't have the X that we were depending on that guest to bring. It's not necessarily a bad thing, whatever this surprise is. But what it requires is adaptability. That's what gets us through it, the adjustment. And sometimes the adjustment may very well be about coming to accept that part of self that needs to be expressed or the part of someone else. If we keep things under the surface too long and don't know how to say it gracefully, it can erupt. And boy, I am paying attention to this as I'm reading it because I have an in-law guest coming that I tend to lose my center about occasionally. So I'm just hyper aware as I'm talking about this. I'm also counseling myself. So the moon goes void, of course, at 4:42 p.m. on Christmas Eve. It enters Pisces at 6:09 p.m. Oh, and the times I give are Eastern time, so you'll need to adjust depending on where you live. And for people who haven't heard me before, when the moon is void, of course, it means it is at the end of the sign it's traveling with, and it's not making another geometric aspect to another planet. And this symbolizes that we are not as emotionally attached to the outcomes. So for roughly, an hour and a half, we are in this sort of float period where people can say things they aren't necessarily invested in. And it's very important. Don't hang on to something as a promise during a void of course moon, because it's probably just something that was thrown out there and there's no glue for it to have follow through. So the moon, once it enters Pisces, then we're in this sweet period. And I absolutely love this. So Christmas Eve into Christmas Day looks very heightened, energetic uh, thresholds for loving connections. So reach out. If you're feeling lonely, call that person you haven't talked to for a while. Go to the event that isn't necessarily your comfort zone, but you heard about the community dinner or the service that is something that has music or that you feel you might want to check out just to be with people. Don't be alone if alone doesn't feel like where you want to be. For some people, it may feel very sweet and healing, but for others, it may feel like, I need to do something. Well, then do it. Just walk in a park, uh, make make connections, smile at a stranger that doesn't look scary. Do those things that give you that sweetness to feel like people are human, because they are. We we are here to relate. And for some of us, it's very difficult. We may have physical, mental, emotional struggles that we need to be sympathetic to and compassionate and work through. But there, there are ways to touch, make those connections. And so seek them out. Give yourself a connection in some way. And I can't emphasize this enough, to nature instead of staring at a screen. Be outdoors, look at the sky. And for those of us who are surrounded by people, because that can be another kind of loneliness for some people, then give yourself an opening or a awareness that perhaps you don't usually allow yourself. I know for me, I'm the over the top caretaker. And I've had to work with that for a long time because I know where it comes from. And it's okay, there are wonderful things about it, but there's also the huge self awareness that I need to be taken care of too. And also, it's super annoying sometimes when you have a person who's always trying to fix or take care of things. And other people want to stretch and do that as well. So these are ways that the Pisces moon can encourage us to sink into a higher octave of love. Music, color, textures, scent, nature, hugs. And if nobody's around, hug yourself. Self-hugging can be a really nice thing to sink into, remind yourself of who you might want to seek a real hug with when you're ready to do that. And for many of us, which I've talked about before, the holidays can be bittersweet or even painful. And so it's important to allow yourself that place to go, but also to gift yourself things that lift you a bit to places of potential. Because if we've been through experiences of pain, and memories like holiday season may bring all that up, yes, it's valuable to remember loved ones, things that we grieve about. But it's also valuable to remember the present, where you are in space today, and look around you and how those connections can happen. Because oftentimes, in my experience, what I find is a pair of eyes that resonate with, I love this time of year, but I also find it so painful. And you can swim into those eyes and make connections that are loving, sweet, and bring up if not necessarily laughter, at least a place of safety and new beginnings and the sense of the infinite connection with loving heart. So allow that in because it will feed you and create new memories. So the moon goes forward, of course, at 2:03 a.m. on Saturday, the 27th. So we have this string of these heightened days, Christmas into Kwanzaa, that have that high loving octave of spiritual connection. And no matter where you are, even if you're alone in the middle of nowhere, play music, connect to nature, do things that allow you to tap in to the universal unconscious because it will vibrate, expand, and heal. And we need, each of us, to tap in on these days with a sense of the world can turn around. There can be more love. There can be less weapons. And there can be more loving connection. I believe not only is it possible, it's the destiny of human beings. And why are we so afraid of that? The moon enters Aries at 3:02 a.m. on Saturday, the 27th, and then it just zooms along this weekend. It's an energy burst of let's connect, let's talk, let's share ideas. I almost feel like we can enter this womb of love in this darkness when lights are put up. I'm talking about Northern Hemisphere. It's the reverse in the South. But think about it as the extreme of either light or dark. And then we're starting to balance and bring in more evenness with where the dark and light go. So whether we're being blasted with light in the Southern Hemisphere where everything's on and everything's bright and go, 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 or we're in the Northern Hemisphere where it's dark and people are feeling more that connection and huddling, it's how do we bring these polarities to more balance? And we basically are presented with this conundrum every year. And we go to extremes. We certainly are at extremes now. But when we're in these cycles that really bring into clear view in a natural way, this is what it looks like in the nature world. How do we reconcile these truths for greater balance within the human spirit? And as I always say, the antidote is love. Much love to you all.
You have been listening to Astrology Insight Now. Please share with your friends, and if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so at astrologyinsightnow.com. Have a stellar week, and we hope to see you next time.